Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and I wanted to follow up on my previous video number McClellan 2393, where I talked about why it's problematic to appeal to the Bible to rationalize putting a serial sexual predator in the White House. And I want to pause real quick and say, if when I said put a serial sexual predator in the White House, you had alarm bells going off in your head and you immediately either felt that intuitive pinch or started coming up with objections or arguments against what you heard me say, then this video is for you, because I'm going to discuss an important insight from the cognitive sciences that is a big part of my research in the cognitive science of religion and was a big focus of the methodological framework that I developed within my book, Adonai's Divine Images. But I want to use this optical illusion to discuss this insight. This is called the corn sweet effect. Now, it should look like you are looking at a darker colored object on top of a lighter colored object in a field with the sky above. But if you use your finger or some other object to cover up the seam where they meet, both the shadow and the highlight right in the middle, you should be able to see that they're actually both the exact same color gray. And when you take your finger or whatever away, it should go back to looking like they're two different shades of gray. What's going on here is that your mind perceives this to be an object in space, and because of certain evolutionarily installed default settings, and because of the conditioning that you have had as a result of growing up human, your mind expects the light source to come from above, and your mind expects the object on top to be lighter than the object that is in the shadow below. But because they are the exact same shade of gray, your mind is actually projecting a different experience onto your perception because it does not fit with what your mind expects. And this illustrates what's called your intuitive cognition. This is that cognition that is automatic, it's rapid, it is subconscious, you don't know about it, and you don't control it. You cannot say, okay, brain, stop doing that. That doesn't change anything. And this illustrates a principle called dual process cognition. And there are a bunch of different titles for it. But in short, there is subconscious cognition and there is conscious cognition. And they frequently come into conflict. And this is an example of that. And another thing that this illustrates is that we don't perceive the world around us as it is. We perceive it as our minds allow us to. Our minds are actively rifling through every piece of sensory and cognitive mail that we have ever and will ever receive. And one of the things this means is that not only are our senses governed by our evolutionarily installed concern to protect our physical selves, but also by our evolutionarily installed concern for protecting our standing within the social identities that are important to us, as well as the standing of our social identities, because we are fundamentally social creatures. And so whether you are aware of it or not, or believe it or not, your identity politics come before any actual conscious cognition that you engage in. And so if you immediately had a red flag go up and alarm bells go off when I referred to Donald Trump as a serial sexual predator, that's because your subconscious intuitive cognition perceived some kind of threat to either a social identity that is important to you or your standing within a social identity that is important to you. That is an obstacle to critical thinking because we will frequently leverage our reflective cognition in defense of our intuitive cognition. It's called rationalization. We want to perceive that we are good. We want to perceive that our intuitions are good. So we might even say, God is talking to us, or that's the Spirit telling us something. No, it's just our intuitive cognition telling us what it thinks we need and what it thinks we want. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the people who are having a hard time with putting a serial sexual predator in the White House, because I want you to understand a little better where they're coming from so you can think a little more critically about them. Now, I've seen a number of stories recently about folks who have had relationships severed, particularly women. They've either done the severing themselves or they've had their relationships with family members and close friends severed by their family members and close friends because they've raised objections to putting a serial sexual predator in the White House, and those friends and family don't care. They say, you're ruining relationships because of politics. And that's just a rationalization. I want you to do a bit of a thought experiment with me. Imagine you're a child growing up in a house where there is emotional abuse, physical abuse, or maybe even sexual abuse. And it is either done by the authority figures in the house, or it is excused and ignored or facilitated by the authority figures in the house. People who grow up in situations like that often don't feel safe or comfortable in their own homes because they know at any moment somebody could come in and can abuse them, and they have nowhere they can turn. The people they're supposed to be able to turn to are telling them, it doesn't matter, it's your fault. Their future is more important, or what we need that they can give us is more important. And so children growing up in an environment like that frequently feel dehumanized, devalued, and unsafe. And hopefully they are able to get out of those situations, and they grow up, and there's probably years and years of therapy, but maybe they feel safe living on their own. At least they don't live within a household where they know that at any moment someone could come in and rob them of their autonomy and of their safety. And the authority figures, the people who are supposed to protect them, would tell them, it doesn't matter, it's your fault. We can't ruin this individual's promising future. And then we elected a serial sexual predator to the White House. And a lot of people don't realize how re-traumatizing this was, because it took that limited scope where inside their house they felt unsafe, and then it expanded it to the whole nation, so that now they don't know who around them might excuse serial sexual predation. They don't know who around them might say, oh, well, your feelings don't matter. Oh, well, you deserve it. Oh, well, your body, my choice. They don't know if something is going to happen in the post office. They don't know if something is going to happen when they're picking up their kids from school. They don't know if something is going to happen while they're sitting in a pew at church. It re-traumatizes people to suddenly find out that they are surrounded by folks who respond to them in the exact same way that their abusers or their abusers' facilitators responded to them in that much smaller scope in which they grew up. And so when you don't take seriously the fact that electing a serial sexual predator to the presidency turns the nation into a place where a lot of people no longer feel safe and no longer feel like they can trust the people around them, that's a problem. And when you just dismiss them as putting politics ahead of relationships, that is just finding a rationalization for why you should not have to care about the fact that you have made the nation an unsafe place for so many people. And if you immediately set to coming up with excuses, again, that's that intuitive cognition trying to make you feel like you're a good person for putting a serial sexual predator into the White House. And if you did help put a serial sexual predator into the White House, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. It means you made a bad choice, but you can still be better. You can still do better. We all need to do better, so this country does not become a less and less safe place for a larger and larger portion of our population. It is imperative that you learn to think critically. You need to learn to Google competently as well. If you cannot be bothered to take seriously the fact that your body, my choice, is a gigantic threat to the well-being and to the humanity of an awful lot of people in our society, because you need to feel good about your votes to put a serial sexual predator in the White House, you need to grow the hell up. And the fit for this video has been LeVar Burton says read banned books.